Okay, good morning everybody. First of all, welcome and thank you for taking the time to come and hear about some of the research that we're doing. My name is Stephen Smith, just introduced. I'm from the Department of Electronic Engineering. My first degree is actually in computer science. So with that heavy mix, what am I doing here looking at healthcare? Well, ever since my undergraduate days, my undergraduate project, which is more years ago than I'd like to care to admit, was with a local hospital. And that was great. My higher degrees were looking at healthcare applications again in conjunction with hospitals, and so hence my career has always been in applying computers to problems in healthcare. So that's super. So what I'm going to talk about this morning is about one of the projects, and I haven't got much time, and that is applying this to people with Parkinson's. Now, I think probably we all know or have known somebody with Parkinson's. It's a very common neurodegenerative condition. It affects about 1 in 500 or about 1 in 100 of people over the age of 60. And as we're all living longer, it's going to mean it's going to become more of an issue. There is no cure presently for Parkinson's, but there are good medications for the symptoms. And so I think most people are familiar with the symptom of tremor, but interestingly, tremor only occurs in 70% of people with Parkinson's. The other 30 do not tremor. And so actually tremor is not a good symptom to try and measure. So the other symptoms are bradykinesia, a slowing of movement, which can range from imperceptible hesitations down to complete freezing. And then there's a rigidity and problems with gait, and then many what we call non-motor symptoms like anxiety, depression, etc. So the approach that we've taken, or I've taken in my career, is to measure movement. So we measure movement using sensors attached to the fingers, warm, digitizing tablets, looking at patients drawing, and all of these movements we then analyze once they've been digitized using various techniques, but more recently machine learning. I belong to the Intelligent Systems Group in the Department of Electronic Engineering, and we've been looking at forms of machine learning for the last 10 to 15 years. And in fact, we call them biologically inspired computing approaches because we look at nature and we burrow mechanisms in nature and get our computers to work in a similar way. I think it's really topical now that machine learning has become so fashionable that it's important to explain very briefly that not all machine learning techniques are the same. There are many different approaches, and depending on the application and type of data, it's important to understand the limitations and also the benefits of these machine learning approaches. So back to the particular work I'm going to show you here. So I did some work on digitizing a patient's finger tapping test. This is something that is conventionally done in a hospital clinic if you're suspected of having Parkinson's. And this is assessed currently visually on a scale of 0 to 4, where 0 means normal tapping and 4 means real problems in tapping, to do with the speed and the amplitude and how regularly you tap. So this is great. I did some work, applied machine learning, went along to meet a specialist, Dr. Stuart Jameson, consultant neurologist at Leeds General Infirmary. This is about 10 years ago, and said, look, we've got this technique, isn't it brilliant? Do you want to use it? And he said, this is all well and good, but actually we don't have that much trouble diagnosing people with Parkinson's after a year or so. They're pretty confident they've got it. The real problem for his daily caseload are people who they know have Parkinson's, but have problems with the medication. So medication for Parkinson's, very briefly, tends to be artificial dopamine. The problem with Parkinson's is that dopamine producing neurons die in the brain, therefore the dopamine isn't present, and this is a neurotransmitter, and that's what affects the motor actions. And so by giving artificial dopamine, we're replacing that lost dopamine, and you regain some good functionality. Now, these drugs are really good for the first 5 to 10 years. But after 5 years, 50% of people with Parkinson's start experiencing side effects, and after 10 years, 90% of people have these side effects. So what do these side effects look like? Well, they're uncontrollable movements. So if you've ever seen somebody with Parkinson's has a movement like this, almost a dancing movement, then that isn't Parkinson's, that's a side effect of too much medication. Now this becomes really serious because then when the person feels unable to control their standing or their movement, they need a lot more care, and also a risk of falling increases. Unplanned admissions to hospital for people with Parkinson's, usually through falls, account for 85% of all the funding for caring for people with Parkinson's. It's about £180 million a year. So if we can improve this situation and actually give them sufficient information, specialists can reduce these side effects of the medication, which tend to oscillate a lot during the day. So at the moment, if you have a problem with your medication, you might get a consultation with your specialist. 2 weeks' time, you go along for a 15-minute consultation, and the specialist is going to say, describe to me precisely how these side effects occur throughout the day. Well, immediately we've got a real problem with reliability of that information. But if they've got detailed, objective information of these side effects in relation to when the medication was taken, they can then adjust the huge, complex cocktail of drugs to then be able to reduce these side effects and have a higher quality of living. So the solution is straightforward. The idea is that we keep the patient in their own homes. We attach commercially available sensors, and they're just gyroscope accelerometers, just like you have in your smartphones, to each of the limbs. And then over a 24-hour period, we just measure all the movements of everyday life. After that 24-hour period, we then take these monitors, take them back to the hospital, plug them in the dock, upload the data, and this is where we apply our machine learning to differentiate between those movements associated with the side effect of the medication from any other movement of the day, like making a cup of tea, making a sandwich, going for a walk, so forth. And then we can generate a chart. A time chart is generated automatically. So this shows that we started measuring at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We finished the following day. The red dots are when the medication was taken, and the precise medication is listed in the table here with the times. And then importantly, these green bands are showing when the machine learning has detected movement it believes is the side effect of the medication, which is termed dyskinesia. And we can see here that high dyskinesia, which relates directly to the standard scale, Unified Dyskinesia Rating Scale, which specialists are familiar with, is level 4, dark green, and light green is level 3. So those are the two measures of clinical interest. So immediately now, a specialist has before them precisely when the medication was taken and when any dyskinesia, the side effects, took place. And so it's a relatively straightforward job now to readjust that medication cocktail to even out. So we can see here that there's some dyskinesia. Patients tend not to be dyskinetic overnight during sleep, but the following day we can see a lot of problems here. And so here it would be a case of either readjusting those medications, or once it gets to the stage where medication is no longer effective, then a chart like this can give really good information to show that other approaches like deep brain stimulation are warranted. So that was the basic idea in research, but how do we get the impact? How do we get to benefit the patients? So this is where I was very fortunate to be brought out from a year of teaching under Royal Academy of Engineering Enterprise Fellowship. They provided the help and support to set up a spin-out company from within the university. They also provided some other expertise to help us really get underway of being able to make this technology commercially available. Also from funding here at the university under the C2D2 program, and also the help of the University Research Enterprise Office. We're now at the stage where we are commercially providing this equipment. Importantly, we've got CE marking, we've got the regulatory approval to sell in the UK and throughout Europe. We've had a health economic assessment undertaken which showed that not only will introducing this technology into the NHS save about a third of the cost of managing people with these side effects, but it also significantly improves the quality of life as well. So that's where we currently are. And I've got a picture there of me in China, and this is a really interesting second part to this project. So initially we looked at, of course, the health systems in the UK and Europe, but in China there is a huge issue, and that is that by 2030 it's estimated that half of all the people in the world presenting with Parkinson's, in other words, those that are recognised having Parkinson's, will be from China, and that will be in the region of 5 million people. Now, the health system, the way that people are cared for in China is very different to the UK. It's traditional that people who are ill are always cared for within the home. And when you have somebody who has problems like side effects and the dyskinesia that I just described, that is very difficult to manage. And so it's been shown that the medication and the care people in China is different to that in the Western world. In fact, there's not much dyskinesia in China. It's been well reported. It's only 15% of people with Parkinson's at 25 because the medication is a lot less. So consequently, people are a lot more docile state, and arguably their quality of life could be improved if they were in receipt of more medication. But the opportunity here is to give people the confidence they can be fully medicated if we prevent them from having the side effects. And so this is currently the subject of Global Challenges Research Fund project, and also will contribute towards the forthcoming rep as well. So just to finish up, as ever, this work is never one person. This work is with a lot of people, a lot of studies that we've done worldwide, and it just gives me an opportunity to say that the same approach, the same technology of machine learning can be applied to other conditions. So one of the problems with early diagnosis of Parkinson's is that it's often unreliable. It's widely accepted that 25% of all people who have currently been told they have Parkinson's do not have Parkinson's. They have another neurological, neurodegenerative condition, such as essential tremor, progressive supranuclear palsy, multiple system atrophy, dystonia, Huntington's disease. There are many other conditions. And to be fair, after 12 months to 18 months, this diagnosis is confirmed conventionally, traditionally, but to be able to get an earlier diagnosis means that people with Parkinson's will get the correct medication earlier. And finally, I just want to say that I mentioned earlier, there isn't currently any cure for Parkinson's, but our technology is now being used in clinical trials to repurpose drugs. So Dr. Camille Carroll was chief investigator on a trial looking at repurposing a statin, simvastatin, traditionally used for reducing cholesterol, but is also thought to have a neuroprotective effect. And so by using this technology, we can give an objective measure of the changes in the patient's symptoms, which will hopefully confirm that some of these drugs will prove to be useful in the future. I think that's it, so thank you very much.